Clawland here, and you're watching Left Hand Reviews, and it's such a gorgeous spring day here in Atlanta that I figured I'd do this special review outside. And today we're going to take a look at Elemental Clash, the Master Set. And those of you who have been watching my reviews for some time notice that I've done several reviews on the various expansions in the Elemental Clash family. And today we're going to look at the Master Set, which is the latest edition from Andreas Probst's excellent two-player card game. Now, what makes this different from the other expansions that I've talked to you about before is this is really a core set. This is not an expansion. This is going to give you everything you need to play the game, just like the basic set was that when I reviewed that back then. Now, the major difference with the Master Set and why I'm really excited to talk about this is it has all new artwork. In addition to some new cards, the big thing about this is it's all brand new, fully professional artwork. So you're not going to be able to distinguish the artwork on these cards from those other mainstream, super high budget card games like Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Star Wars. The artwork in this is incredible, and you're going to see that when we start going over how to play the game. And since this game is soon to be on a Kickstarter, I'm going to go through and explain exactly how to play the game with this new set and all the different types of spells and abilities that come in this, as well as the Spellcaster expansion that's going to come in the Master Set as well. It's also important to note that this is going to be fully compatible with all previous sets and expansions of Elemental Clash. There's no different card back or anything like that. Everything will mesh up perfectly if you already have purchased these sets. So for those of you who do not know about Elemental Clash, and this is your first time hearing about it, it's a two-player tactical card battling game, very similar in the same vein or family as Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Star Wars trading card game, and all those old school deck builders. And this is an old school deck builder in the sense that you're going to sit there and build yourself a 40 card deck, not like Dominion deck building where you build a deck during the course of the gameplay. So I'm not really going to go over the components. I'm just going to dive right into gameplay and explain how to play Elemental Clash, and then it'll be up to you to decide if you want to back the new Kickstarter that's upcoming and make this a part of your game collection. When you open up your copy of Elemental Clash, the Master Set, you're going to have a huge deck of cards, a huge stack of cards. There's about 300 cards that come in here, and you're not going to find any more than 3 of each card, besides, of course, the basic element stones, which we'll go over in a minute. So there are tons of cards. There's a huge variety. And I mean, there's plenty here to allow you to create tons of different decks, even to split this in half and have an opponent build their decks out of this as well. So this is not a one-person starter set. This is enough easily for 2 people to start playing the game. So let me walk you through the basic anatomy of the various cards. So the 2 basic card types are going to be your creature cards and your spell cards. And then you also have your utility type cards, which would be your element stones. Now this is a creature card, and you can see it has the name of the creature at the top. On the right hand side here is going to be the level of the card. That also corresponds to the number of element stones that are necessary to summon this creature. You have the type of card, your creature card, a family that it belongs to, of fish, because there of course are other cards that may benefit all fish creatures or all of creature of another type. On the right here is its attack power. In the green shield you have the defensive power. Then down here you have any special abilities that may correspond to this card. In this case it says Boon comes into play with a +1 attack and +1 defense counter. So this particular card has a special ability called Boon that I'll go over later, and when it does come into play due to Boon, it gets a +1/+1. And then you have some nice flavor text at the bottom. This one says, "The mysterious king of catfish conceals secrets of power beneath its innocent looks." Look at the artwork on these new cards. They're just fantastic. Here is what a spell card looks like. It's going to look very familiar to the creature card, but instead it's going to say spell down here at the bottom, and it's going to tell you what exactly the spell does. In this case, the bookmark allows you to search your spell book for any one card and put it into your hand. Shuffle your spell book afterwards. Here we have a flash spell. This is called Vision. A flash spell is very similar to a regular spell, except for a flash spell can be played anytime, even on your opponent's turn. And this one says, look at the top 3 cards of your spellbook and put them back in any order. Then you may draw 1 card, and this also has the salvage ability. So those are the 2 main types of cards, spells and creatures. But then you also have these element stones that I keep mentioning. There's 4 basic element stones: water, air, earth, and fire. And they're going to correspond to planets. Jupiter, for example, being air. And you have the Mercury stone, which produces the water. You have your Mars stone, which is going to produce your fire. And your Venus stone, which is your earth. You also have special element stones that produce multiple colors or multiple types of energy. You also have neutral element stones, which are going to produce no particular kind of energy, not wild, but rather neutral, nothing, but they usually have some sort of special ability associated with them. Now let me set up a game. I'm going to show you the rules and how to play. So this is going to be your basic setup for the beginning of a game of Elemental Clash. Essentially, what you see here in the graphic is that each player's play area is going to be divided into 3 areas. You're going to have your element stone pile, or element stone area on the bottom, your defense zone in the center, and your attack zone on top. And you can see your spellbook and archive are going to be off to the right hand side. Now each turn is going to be divided into 4 very simple phases. First phase is going to be your standby phase. That's when you're going to be able to take the creatures that you've summoned on the previous turn and put them into play. You can also move those creatures between the attack and defense zone at will. Then you're going to move to step 2, draw phase, where you're going to draw the topmost card from your spellbook. Next, you're going to move into the main phase. The main phase is where most of the meat of the game is going to happen. You're going to be able to play element stones, play creatures, play spells, and also attack. You can do all these things in any order that you want, provided that you have enough element stone energy to play the cards, and knowing that you can only play 1 element stone per turn. And then finally, you're going to move on to the end phase, which is where any end of turn effects are going to trigger, and where you must discard down to 7 cards if you happen to have more than that in your hand. Now, the object of the game is to reduce your opponent's spellbook to 0, meaning they have 0 cards left in their spellbook. The cards in the game are going to be used as creatures and spells and other sorts of things that you're going to play, but they also serve as life points. So every time you take damage, you're going to be discarding cards from your spellbook into your archive. So you need to be very careful about drawing cards out of your spellbook, as well as putting up a good enough defense that your opponent isn't forcing you to discard those cards as well. So let's run through a quick starting turn. So you're going to start the game by drawing 7 cards off the top of the deck, which I have. There is a mulligan rule, that is, if you draw a bad hand, you get 1 free reshuffle and mulligan draw to try a new hand of 7 cards, which is kind of nice. And you can do additional mulligans if you want, but each additional time that you shuffle and redraw, your hand size for that initial draw is reduced by 1. So here's what I have in my hand. So the first thing I'm going to do is, it's the standby phase. I don't have any creatures out, so I don't have to be doing anything in the standby phase, so we're going to move to the draw phase. I'm going to draw 1 card off the top of my deck, and I have a Cumulus creature. It has a 2/2. And discard 1 card from your hand, and Cumulus gets +1 attack and +2 defense until end of turn. It's pretty nice. So now the first thing I'm going to do, now that we are in the main phase, is I'm going to play an element stone. So I'm going to play that element stone here into my element stone area. Now the next thing I'm going to do is play a creature. And I just happen to have a Minion of the Skies in my hand. This is a spirit creature, and it cannot be blocked, but it only has a 1/1 attack defense. I'm going to play that on top of my air stone, because this stack of stones produces 1 air energy, and this level 1 air creature requires only 1, so I'm going to place it there. Now that's going to be the end of my main phase, because there's nothing more that I can do. We move on to the end phase. There's no end of turn triggers that happen, so it is now going to be my opponent's turn. And again, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to start by drawing a card from their spell deck, playing an element stone, and then possibly playing a creature or a spell on that, or maybe they'll wait until the following turn. Now it's my turn again. We're in the standby phase, and I'm going to be able to take my creature and place it either into my defense zone or into the attack zone. So I'm going to start by putting it into the attack zone because this particular creature can't be blocked, so he's a good one to have out there. And then I'm going to move to my draw phase. Draw a card. Looks like I drew an Arcane Teachings. Now I'm going to play another Element Stone. Now when I play another Element Stone, I can either add it to my existing pile, or I can create a new stack. Now here's why that matters. When I put it here, I now have an Element Stone stack of 2 stones that is going to be producing 2 energy. The type of energy that the pile produces is always equal to whatever the bottommost card is. If you happen to have a neutral card on bottom, you don't produce neutral energy, rather you produce energy equal to the bottommost basic energy stone, or if you have non-neutral special stones, whatever those are. So you can never produce just solid, neutral energy. So if I do that, I'll be producing 2 energy, and that will allow me to play level 2 creatures onto it. Or I can start a second stack, and now I have 2 places to play creatures and spells. So this would allow me to play maybe a level 1 spell here, and another level 1 spell, or a level 1 creature, or whatever I want. So this gives me more options, whereas putting them on top of each other allows me to possibly bring out stronger creatures or play stronger spells. So again, it's up to you. I'm going to stack it, and I'm going to bring out Cumulus. Cumulus is a 2/2. We kind of went over him earlier. Discard 1 card from your hand. He gets +1, +2 until end of turn. I'm going to place him on my Element Stone stack. Now I'm going to attack with my Minion of the Skies. When you attack, you have 2 options. You can either attack an opponent's creature that's in their attack zone, and you're going to apply damage to that creature that you have chosen, or you can attack a player directly. If you attack a player directly, that player has the option to take the damage, equal to obviously your attack strength, which would cause them to discard cards from their spellbook into their archive, or they can use a creature card that happens to be in their defense zone to block that creature. They can use multiple creatures in their defense zone to block one of your attacking creatures. All damage is going to be dealt simultaneously, so if my opponent blocked me with a creature, for example, let's say they had this greater catfish in their defense area and were going to block me, then it would do 2 damage against my 1 defense, and my 1 damage would go against his 2 defense. That would destroy my creature, which would then go into my archive, and his catfish would remain okay because it was not destroyed. At the end of the end phase, all creatures are going to be healed back up to their maximum hit points again. So there's no tracking of HP in this game. Remember, it's really important to decide whether you want to go into your attack zone or your defense zone, because your only people that can defend are people in the defense zone, and only people that can attack are those in the attack zone. So you need to have an equal attack and defensive strategy, in my opinion, or else you're just going to get pummeled. Now remember, we said that this creature, the Minion of the Skies, cannot be blocked. So in fact, when I did attack with this, there would be no way for the player to block with one of the creatures, so they would have to discard 1 card from their spellbook. Now, the way that you play spells is going to be the same way in which you play creatures. So instead, if it was my turn and I wanted to play this Arcane Teaching spell, again, you just place it on the Element Stone stack, and I'm producing 2 energy here, and this only requires 1, so I'm okay. And then you're immediately going to do the effect, which is draw 2 cards, then discard 1 from your hand, which is pretty straightforward. Okay, I might not want this one, so I'll discard it, and that's that. And this is going to stay here until the next standby phase, where you're going to take this spell and just place it into your discard pile, which is going to open this up for your next main phase. So that really is the core of this game. You're going to be playing element stones, and you're going to be playing creatures and spells based on the element stones that you have in play. And you're going to be attacking each other's opponents and creatures, and the first person to reduce their opponent's spellbook to 0 is going to be the winner. And the last thing I just want to mention before we wrap up is that the Elemental Clash Master Set is going to come with a mini expansion called the Spellcasters. And this is a really, really neat expansion that adds, really actually changes the gameplay a lot, in my opinion. And you can see these cards have some of the coolest artwork in the game. Now what you're going to do with the Spellcasters is, if you and your opponent decide to play with it, is each of you is going to choose a Spellcaster. And this is basically just going to change some of the basic rules for the entire. So in other words, if you chose Memnon the Protector, rather, Looks like here you're going to have a hand size of 7. You're going to be able to draw 1 card during the draw phase. And you're going to have a deck size actually of 45 instead of the normal 40. Then you're also going to have a static ability that says creatures you control get +1 defense, and then a one-time flip ability that says put the top 5 cards from your archive under your spellbook in any order. Here's an example of another one here. We have Denevale the Enchantress. She's going to allow you to have an 8-card hand limit, drawing 1 card each draw phase, a 35-card deck, and it says at the beginning of your end phase, put the topmost card from your archive under your spellbook. So that's almost like a regeneration or healing every turn, and it has a flip ability that says gain control of target creature for the remainder of the game. Put it in your defense zone. If it would leave play, it is purged instead. So again, these spellcasters are a really neat way to change the way the game is played. It allows essentially for asynchronous play between the two sides because players may have different hand size, different size decks, etc. So that's a really neat expansion. Of course, it is not necessary to play. It is something that you would only probably add after you and your opponent have gotten pretty experienced with the game. Now that game overall sounds relatively simple, and in its most basic form it is, but where all of the variability and strategy comes into play is in the building of your decks, and there's lots of different types of cards that can go into your deck, which gives it almost an infinite amount of variability and strategy that you can have. It really reminds me a lot of Magic the Gathering in the sense that there's different types of cards that are good at certain things, and you can build decks and strategies around types of cards, and it just makes the game a ton of fun. So anyway, I'll get into more of that during the conclusion, but let me show you some more of the types of cards and spells that you're going to have in Elemental Clash. So the first one that we have, which we talked about earlier, are the flash spells, and you can see several examples on screen now. The flash spell, again, will allow you to play a spell at any point, not only on your own turn, but also on your opponent's turn, which can be really good for interrupting what your opponent's trying to do and really mess up their strategy. You also have your permanent spells, which again you're going to play just like any other spell, but when it is time for that spell to be moved to your discard pile, you're instead going to move it to the side of play where it's going to remain in the game permanently, unless of course you or your opponent has some sort of spell to get rid of it. Now there's also a lot of really great card abilities, my favorite one being Boon. What Boon does is it allows your card to take effect when it is placed from your spellbook into your discard pile. So that's to say, remember, when your opponent deals damage to you, you're going to have to discard cards from your spellbook into your archive. But if you happen to discard a card from your spellbook in your archive and that spell or creature has Boon, it's immediately going to come into play, just as if you'd placed it on an element stone stack. And that can sometimes be even better, because not only does it interrupt what your opponent was planning on doing, but it comes into play essentially for free. A Boon deck is a really cool strategy and deck to build. Now you also have your destroy effects, and that just says each time a creature is destroyed, the effects as described on the card are going to take place. You also have your leave effect, which says each time a creature leaves play, then the effects described on the card are going to take place. You have your play effects, which again, those are effects that happen when the card is put into play. You also have the purge ability, which says instead of putting cards from your spellbook into your archive when you're dealt damage, the player that is being purged must place those cards out of the game. So that means there's no way for them to get them back from their archive into their spellbook. You also have the quick attacker, which says that as long as the creature is brought into play on an element stone pile, that creature is treated as if it's in your attack zone and can immediately attack, meaning it doesn't have to wait a turn from summoning sickness. Then you also have creatures with range. A creature with a ranged attack may deal damage to a player or creature in any zone. And then finally you have your salvage ability. Salvage is very similar to Boon, except for the fact that in Salvage, if you were to place a card from your hand into your archive, it's immediately going to go into play, whereas Boon is if it goes from your spellbook into your archive. Make sense? So those are the main types of abilities that you have, and there's just a ton of variability that this adds to the game. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is Elemental Clash, the Master Set. So if you were thinking about getting on board with this game, the Master Set is the perfect place to start. I know there's going to be a Kickstarter coming up soon, or you may be watching this video on the Kickstarter. You're going to want to pick this game up, definitely. The game has just gotten so much better over the years, and now with the artwork, which is absolutely phenomenal, you really can't go wrong. The other great thing is that this game has a ton of expansions. Okay, you have the Tribes expansion, you have Underworld expansion, you have the original basic set when it came out, and you have the Spellforce expansion. So you have tons of expansions. I'm sure there's going to be some great stretch rewards and exclusives to the Kickstarter campaign. So really now is the best time to jump in this game. So if you haven't seen my videos or you couldn't tell, I really enjoy this game. It is probably my favorite two-player head-to-head card game. And the reason for that is there is so much going on. It's really simple to pick up, which those who watch know that's something that I enjoy because it helps me get Wesley to play with me. It's also really easy to get other players into the game. You know, Magic the Gathering, I just remember being so complex, you know, when I was learning it way back in the day, that it kind of had a higher barrier to entry, whereas this does not. It's really easy to get up and going, yet there's so much variability, there's so many expansion, there's so much diversity, that's the word I've been looking for, in this game, that you really can't, you know, you just can't go wrong. I've mentioned it before, there's always going to be comparisons drawn to this, to Magic, to Pokemon, to Yu-Gi-Oh, and to all those other card combat games, and rightfully so. This is a great game that easily stands with the best of those. The only real negative that I have to say about Elemental Clash is the fact that it is a classic deck builder. So it's not the kind of game that you can just say bust out at a game group and just start playing, because a lot of times people are going to want to take the time to create their own deck. In order for them to be able to do that, they're going to have to be familiar with the game. So it's almost like something that you take some time with some partners or other people and play the game a few times, and then everyone could get their own set. Or you could just have a deck building type party where everyone just builds their own decks and just has fun in a party type atmosphere. But once everybody in your gaming group or the people that you play with would have their own set, then you'll be able to play anytime and whenever you want. But just keep in mind, this isn't something that you can just break out and play as easily as you can a Carcassonne or Ticket to Ride or any of your native board games. Another nice thing about this game is it plays very quickly, so it's great for you to play a few games in between other games, or if you want to try out that new deck, you're not going to be sitting there for an hour and a half, 2 hours playing before you decide you need to change everything up and then play another 2 hours to decide how that deck's going to do. It's really easy, it's quick to play, and it's great for tournament style play where you do best out of 5, best out of 3, so on and so forth. There's also some additional rules that I didn't really go over that include a sideboard, which allows you to swap cards in between matches. So that's really all I have to say about Elemental Clash, the Master Set. It's a great set. I love the new artwork. I liked Andreas Probst's original artwork, but this new artwork is even better, and it's a great game. I really think you should pick it up. It's one I really enjoy, and so good luck, and I hope to see you playing Elemental Clash in the future.